Using Mayo 2013, and I'm just showing you a few bits and bobs that you can do with cameras, how to edit them, how to play around with them, and some of the options that you have within that. So without further ado, let's go for it. To make a camera, you just go to Create, and inside there you'll find Cameras, and you've got three main options here. You've got Camera, Camera Aim, and Camera Aim and Up. Stereo camera we'll come and have a quick look at in a minute or two, which is quite good fun. So let's just have a look at Camera, Camera Aim Up, and Camera Aim to begin with. So starting with Camera, when you make a camera, it will be made at the origin 000 of your grid reference, which is not in the middle of the page here. This is one I made earlier. And every camera has its own set of attributes. You can get to those attributes in a number of ways. If you have it selected, then it will open up if you have the attribute editor showing at the side over here. If you can't see it, or you want to see the attributes for the camera you're actually looking through, well, in this case I'm looking through the perspective camera at the moment, so if I want to see the attributes for that camera, I can go to View and I can go Camera Attribute Editor, and it will actually switch over to the camera which you're using at the moment. Now I'll just run down some of these options which are quite useful. So for a start, focal length, we can change that to a wide angle lens. You'll see what happens here. We can change that to a wide angle lens if we want to, or we could keyframe it and change it to a narrow lens, so a zoomed in option. Playing around with this, you can actually animate it as well, so it changes from one focal length to another. So you can play around with that during your animations to generate all sorts of cool fun effects. Also down here you've got this near and far clip frame. You'll notice sometimes when you're working with Mayo, particularly in big scenes, that stuff seems to clip off at the back edge, and that's because of this far clip frame. If you're finding stuff disappears when it goes either too close or too far away from the camera, what it means is you need to change these numbers here. So I bet if I change this to about 5, we might see some stuff disappear. Maybe 10. There you go. So you can see exactly what's happened there. It started to stop rendering the stuff that's closer by 10. So I'll just change that back to 0, and it will come back again. So controlling what's seen. Now that can be quite useful, especially if you want to do like a cross-section view of something, or you want to edit something that's quite complex and you want to narrow down the plane of the area of stuff that you can select. So it can be quite useful as well during modelling, even if you're not filming with it. Further down the list we've got all sorts of other options here that you can play around with, but the last one I want to show you right now is this environment settings. Notice you've got depth of field here and output settings here as well, so you can, there's all sorts of things you can play around with, and options down here that you can switch on. Anyway, going to the background colour. If you click on that, you can change the colour of the background, and that will change the colour of the background that gets rendered when it gets rendered from this camera. So you can see how green that's made that. So perfect for removing backgrounds from scenes if you want to do that. Quite a nice black by default. So that's that really. You can go through that list, and there's loads of other attributes you can play around with the camera. So let's have a look at the next camera, which is the Camera and Aim. Now this is particularly useful for following objects around, or getting the camera to stay with a fixed object or focal distance. So we can select the object here, and I can select the aim of the object, and I can actually constrain those together so that if I move the object, the camera follows it wherever it goes, which is particularly useful and saves you doing a lot of animation with the camera, which might be a bit more difficult to track sometimes. We can also move the camera around independently around that object as well now, so it generates a focus for the camera's point, which can be useful. So the last one is this Camera Aim and Up, which in some cases just overly complicates your rig when you don't need it, but in a lot of cases it can be useful. So what it does, it means that this up pivot controls the angle or the upright angle of the camera. That can be really useful if you're trying to go do a loop-the-loop or something along those lines. So let's just as an example, let's just grab the aim and the camera, and I'm just going to put those in a group, pressing Ctrl G, and then I'm just going to get the move tool, which you can see the pivot is over here at the moment. So I'm just going to press Insert and move that pivot in, hopefully to close to the camera, I'm not going to worry about it too much. And then press insert again. And so I've moved that pivot around, so this is just going to show you exactly what I mean. So if I slide this backwards and forwards now, you can see exactly what's going on with how it's holding the point. And also if I use the rotation tool, I can rotate it, and if I did that all the way over, it's going to have a nice loop-the-loop effect, quite a nice effect for occasion sometimes, but not all the time. Yeah, it can be useful, but you're less likely to use it. The one that I use most of the time is the camera and aim. It is used more often than anything else. That brings us to our last option, which is the stereo camera rig. I'm just going to delete this lot here. The stereo camera rig comes with 3 cameras as standard. A central camera, which shows you kind of like the image that you would see in the finished video, and the 2 wing cameras for the left and right eye, which set up the binocular effect, if you like. Now inside Maya you can actually render that as different kind of images inside Maya if you want to, so let's just set this up. So I'm going to go straight into the attribute editor for this group, and you can see down here, let's just go back to the top, we've got near and far clip frames as usual, focal lengths as usual, and then we've got this thing here, the interaxial separation, and if you reduce that, it's bringing the cameras closer together. Now in a scene with this sort of scale that I've got here, these cameras need to be pretty close together to give the correct 3D effect, because if you imagine that was or these 2 cameras are someone's eyes, so let's just get a cube and put that in the scene so that we've got something to render in it, and just to make sure that that's looking alright, we'll just go panels, stereo rig, and I'm just going to look through that center camera, so it's yeah, so there we go. Let's just position that there so we can see it's a 3D object. Okay, so I've set up the position. I'll go back to my perspective camera now so you can see what's going on, and let's just set up a few options down here with this stereo camera rig. So moving down, we can display different guidelines to help us work out what's happening in the scene, including this the safe volume area, telling us where it's safe to put objects in our scene if we want to. So we've got all those options down there, and obviously you can switch on depth of field if you wanted to, and pretty much all the rest of it's pretty much the same as usual. Now how to get that to render for you as a 3D kind of anaglyph shape, let's just jump into the the stereo camera rig, and we can just render that. So if I click render, it's actually done it for me automatically here. Inside the options, if it doesn't do it automatically, inside the options you'll find in display, you'll find stereo display, and you can choose what kind of stereo display you want it to do. And inside render you can choose the stereo or the camera rig if you want to render a certain shot there. Okay, so you can stick it on stereo and it will render it up for you, and that's going to separate your colours out for you and give you a nice 3D-esque image from Maya, which is quite cool and good fun, but not always useful. So thank you very much.